Hi there. Business applications is our topic of discussion today. Line of business applications have been around for thousands of years. While functionality of different business applications will be different and will be based on the industry and whatever, core principles will remain the same. And I'm going to try to explore those principles, present you with examples of what they are, and hopefully entertain you a little bit. Let's start. The first thing is users and permissions. The second one is data representation with filtering, sorting, and export functionality, editing of individual records, validations and data integrity, visual representation of aggregated data in dashboards and reports, printout forms, integrations with external systems. Users and permissions can be separated into two distinct categories: authentication and authorization. Authentication is the process of letting somebody log into your system. Authentication can be autonomous, so an application stores usernames and passwords, or it can be integrated with an external authentication provider like Google or Microsoft, and this is usually a preferred way of letting somebody enter your system. Authorization is granting permissions to the authenticated user to explore different areas of your app. Authorization happens right after the user has been authenticated. Permissions in the setting of a business application can control access to creating, reading, updating, and deleting records in your system, as well as control access to other areas of your application. Permissions are usually grouped into roles so that you don't have to assign individual permissions to each user, but rather you can link different roles to different users. You could also link a user to multiple roles. I like to separate permissions into two categories: vertical permissions and horizontal permissions. Vertical permissions allow access to certain types of data based on their values. So in essence, you define a criterion by which you let users access certain parts of the system, whereas horizontal permissions is letting users access your system unconditionally regardless of the data that is being shown. So the next category, data representation with filtering, sorting, and exporting, we need to have a way to show a list of items for a particular type. That list should also allow us to filter by their different properties like their name or their identification number, sort by individual columns, and also export that data. When we talk about the list representation of data, we usually think about columns or properties. You may want to add new columns or remove existing columns or rearrange those columns. Filtering, sorting, and exporting could be thought of as a cohesive unit, so to speak. Editing of individual records is the next area. Can be thought of as opening a detailed view of a record and then allowing a user to change certain values of the customer. Or this can also be done within a list of records without opening a separate detailed view. When we talk about detailed views, we also need to mention that detailed view layout can be changed, and this is another thing which can be handled by an administrator of the system. An extension of editing a record is validations and data integrity. Let's now ask our good old friend ChatGPT what it thinks data integrity is. Data integrity refers to the accuracy, consistency, and reliability of data throughout its lifecycle. Data integrity is essentially the result of enforcing business rules and validations when entering data. Many business enterprises start with only a spreadsheet where one or two people have access to it and they can kind of hold these validations in their head. Once you expand your business operations to more and more people, it's going to be hard to enforce your validations on top of records which other people are creating if you don't have a mechanism to limit people entering data in an invalid way. An example of a validation could be not allowing for a customer record to be created unless identification number follows a predetermined pattern. So one of the primary reasons for why businesses choose to upgrade their spreadsheet-based operations into something more formalized, like a line of business application, is because they don't trust their data that they are entering into the spreadsheets. Now, on the flip side, I have seen many instances of businesses having a line of business application which does not enforce validations or business rules when entering the information. To make such data usable, it first has to be exported, usually at the end of the reporting period, cleaned up, and then only be used to produce meaningful figures and reports. The next area which I'm going to explore is visual representation of aggregated data in dashboards and reports. Data usually needs to be aggregated, meaning that it's not the raw level data that you want to be looking at, but a result of an aggregation. And this usually happens with the help of SQL or SQL queries against one or more databases. Visual representation of aggregated data is a great way to understand the key performance indicators of your business, and we are specifically focusing on operational and financial reporting as the end results of our work, so to speak. So the deliverable of our work is financial and operational reporting because it serves the greatest purpose in our mind. Printout forms is the last thing I'm going to talk about. Printout forms is basically a way of exporting your data for the consumption of the external world. So you may have a printout form for an invoice which you send to your customer, and you may have a printout for everything that you have stored within your system. Printout forms are separate from dashboards and reports. Nowadays, it's less about being printed out, but more about being sent over email. And the system may provide means for you to send these forms without having to export them in the first place. So the last thing to talk about is integrations with external systems. There are two ways of integrations, incoming and outgoing. When we talk about integrations, the term to remember is API, or the Application Programming Interface, which is a fancy term for an endpoint which predefines a set of read and write operations within the system that is exposing the API. In case of incoming integrations, we expose API endpoint to the outside world for them to read and write within our system. In case of external integrations, other systems expose API endpoints for us to interact with. Our system in that case will act as a client, and the other system exposing the API will act as the server. So to recap, what's the anatomy of a business application? What are the principles that hold every business application in place? The users and permissions management, data representation with filtering, sorting, and export functionality, editing of individual records, validations and data integrity, visual representation of aggregated data in dashboards and reports, printout forms, and integrations with external systems. If you'd like to learn whether we could help you with your line of business application creation or development, comment below or book a call with us. And that's it for today. Have a good day. Bye-bye.